We're going to work on vacant registration ordinance and amendments to the rental code. So, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. No comments. You have heard some of this information in the past from Sue Ann. We're going to give you a refresher and an update. So, Sue Ann, it's yours.
So, Mayor, members of council, Sue Ann Donovan, I'm the Neighborhood Services Deputy Director, and we're here to talk about property registration, vacant property registration. So, what is the purpose of a vacant property registration? It's really to ensure that owners of vacant properties are known to the city and that we can reach interested parties if it's necessary. It's also to ensure that owners of vacant properties are aware of their obligations of ownership under relevant city codes and regulations, and to ensure that owners meet a minimum standard of maintenance and upkeep of their properties. So what are the benefits of a vacant property registration? So the registration would be of any vacant abandoned properties and establish a maintenance responsibility between the owner and the city of Des Moines. Registration records would increase safety for first responders that are responding to a call. It also has the potential of decreasing criminal activity due to the requirement of a local management agent monitoring the property. Registration records would help protect neighborhood property values. The requirements would shift the cost of monitoring vacant properties from the city to the property owners. Currently, we have inspectors going out every 30 to 60 days to keep an eye on vacant properties in the city of Des Moines to make sure that they're secured. This would move that responsibility to the owner or a management agent.
I have a question about that. I mean, why do we think it would shift that responsibility? I mean, if they're not doing it today, I mean, we have a certain amount of requirement in this, but why wouldn't they just ignore?
Well, we really don't have any requirements at all in our code right now.
Well, but, I mean, they own the property, they have some, I mean, why, if they're neglecting their property, why would they not neglect the ordinance?
If there's a vacant property registration, they are required to tell us who they are. If they're not in the city, they would be required to appoint a local management agent for local contact. If we go out on a complaint, find out that they're not monitoring the property, we can do a civil infraction and start levying fines against them. Right now, we don't have anything.
Right, but for this to work, wouldn't we have to go out anyway?
Yeah, we will go out once a year when the registration comes due. We will go out on complaint. So if somebody calls and says there's a broken window, we'll go out, we'll send a notice and a notice of violation to the property owner saying you need to take care of this. The idea is to put the onus on them, that they have to monitor it monthly.
Right, but we're currently monitoring it monthly, right, is what you said? And so we would look at it, we'd look at it once a year.
We aren't monitoring every vacant property in the city of Des Moines. We are monitoring the ones that we know are vacant for a particular purpose.
Okay.
Such as a rental property that goes vacant, and we believe that somebody might get moved back in.
So like a vacant structure you don't know about, you're not really going out looking for vacant.
We are not
structures
looking
right
for
now,
vacant.
whereas This will give one more step that hopefully you can figure out where they're at.
Okay.
We hope it can be self-sustaining through the fee system. We'll talk about that a little later. So what are the liabilities of vacant properties? When they're not properly monitored and maintained, they're vacant and abandoned, they become associated with increased levels of crime. Vacant and abandoned properties present an increased risk to health and welfare of residents in the surrounding neighborhood. They significantly lower surrounding property values. They escalate municipal costs associated with vacant and abandoned properties and increase the issues contributing to the surrounding community decline. So what are the requirements going to be? Registration of any vacant abandoned property and those subject to foreclosure. An exception would be properties that are actively listed for sale with the appropriate signage, and they would not have to register. They would have to appoint a local management agent. That's similar to what we do in our rental registration. If they have an insurance provider, we'd want them to give us the name of the insurance provider so we'd have that contact information. And again, they would pay annual fees to keep the property registered. So what would the maintenance requirements be? If the property is boarded, an opening must be replaced with glass and glazing. Boarded entrances shall be replaced or repaired to a professional standard. So if there's a board over a door, we want the door replaced. Ongoing exterior maintenance of the structure, shoveling snow, sidewalks surrounding the property, mowing, cutting down volunteer trees, maintaining landscaping. Security requirements of vacant and abandoned properties. Monitoring and visiting the property on a minimum monthly, keeping a detailed log of each visit, provide written notice to the city if the property is in violation, and that proper steps are being taken to come into compliance. Comply with the ordinance requirements within 30 days. They can request an extension if it's necessary due to weather. We would have the right to add additional security measures if we deemed that it was necessary. The owners we'd have an appeal process so that they could appeal that.
Now, would that go before the Housing Appeals Board for a commercial property, or?
We haven't decided that. It might be the Housing Appeals Board, it might be through the normal administrative appeal process that we have through the administrative hearing process to a ALJ, which is probably better, to be quite honest, So, how does this aid first responders? First responder will be able to know if the property is listed as vacant. They will have the registration records to help responders identify a contact person and if there's an insurance provider. Will help eliminate some hazards such as overgrown conditions, debris, sharp objects. And we hope the proper monitoring will limit criminal activity. We've had a rash of break-ins and fires recently, and we hope that if somebody's monitoring the property, people know that there's somebody coming and going, that maybe it'll stop some of that. There are some program advantages to the investor. We think it can encourage greater investment. It's a proper registration and documentation, encourage responsible investors and responsible lending. The cost of the vacant property registration is figured then into the property investment. And the registration and upkeep would become reflective of the actual cost of owning the property. So we're going to propose fees. Right now we have to go off of sort of what our fee schedule is right now. So we feel that our fee schedule currently would allow a $100 application fee. Complaint inspections billed out at $87.50. Failure to register could result in a civil penalty of $750 for the first offense, $1,000 for each other secondary offense. Also, failure to maintain the property could result in a civil infraction with a court order that they make the necessary repairs. So the next steps would be to draft the ordinance for consideration, present it back to you in the first quarter of 2022. So we are also doing, and you're going to hear a little bit about this in the next presentation, as part of the property improvement, we're going to do a property condition canvas citywide to get sort of the idea of where properties are on the scale of needing repairs or not. So we would use that list to start a list of vacant properties so that we could reach out to the property owners and let them know that they need to register those property. Also reach out to stakeholders regarding the registration requirements. We also already get a fair number of lending institutions contacting us and asking us if we have a vacant property registration. So a lot of the businesses and lending institutions are aware of that requirement in other jurisdictions.
Who would be the stakeholders?
I think mortgage companies, real estate companies,
Okay.
people that are
Banks.
transacting.
Banks?
Banks,
Most
yep.
of those are foreclosures.
Yep, foreclosures through the banks, yep.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yep. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sue Ann, talk to me about when some of these properties are already in the public nuisance, when they're already designated a public nuisance, how do we get around that, and who's going to be responsible? And hopefully we won't have as many public nuisance if we start this program, but the ones that are there, what happens and how does it work for them?
Well, they would also have to come into this process if it's a public nuisance, which we hope would make them take better control of those public nuisances. A lot of those, though, are truly the worst-case scenarios of abandoned, where the property owner has no assets and has simply walked away. So in that case, we might not get as much monitoring, and those would stay on our vacant monitor list for constant, watching them.
So if they don't have anything, then we're still stuck with the same boat of still boarded up and blighted homes, where we see today quite a bit of those that will sit for years.
Yes.
Is there anything we can do about that to speed up that process and to help some of those homes that are sitting in our neighborhoods like that?
Yeah, we are working on speeding up that process and getting those back through the system faster. We had a delay with Intergov. We've now got those glitches pretty much worked out, so you should start seeing a fair amount coming to the council agenda for approval for legal action.
Is the goal to catch it earlier so that we don't get them we have better control, so that we don't go for a year or two and we can't find the owner?
The goal is, correct, to get it into the system and on our radar earlier and have that owner be responsible. Because if we just go out and board it up and then we walk away because it's not a nuisance, it remains boarded. So this would say, okay, we boarded it, now you got to put glass back in that window and you have to monitor that property and keep it from continually getting broken into.
When do we go out and start boarding up? How do we determine that?
Well, usually when we get a complaint that it's open and vacant, we'll send an inspector out, and if it is open and vacant, then we will send our board up crew out.
I guess I have similar concerns that Josh raised. I don't see this working. Like, how often do we do public nuisances and, like, do we just don't get a response after posting a notice, don't get in contact with the owner? I don't know that we would have better luck with this.
Well, this is not a public nuisance process. This is
Right, I'm just saying it's a
standing alone.
similar.
I think in other jurisdictions, the municipalities have found that this is a worthwhile endeavor to keep eyes on the property from the owner instead of having them be able to walk away. And if they're in another city, they have to have somebody local, so they have to have an investment in the property. The goal is to keep them boarded and secured, have the owner have hands-on, and hopefully, if they aren't going to do anything with it themselves, they'll move it on to somebody who will, by having to be involved.
So is the purpose to, like, essentially disincentivize people from leaving the property vacant if they don't want to take care of it?
Yeah, that would be one goal. Because if they can live in Chicago and they own a piece of property they bought on tax sale here, they have no desire to have anything to do with it because all they're doing is a write-off, and we make them now pay attention, hire a local management agent, maybe it doesn't look so good on their books. Maybe they'll try and move it to somebody else.
Okay, I guess then my concerns are just our association with crime with these properties. I don't think is really realistic in what the actual association is. I feel like it's a two-way street, essentially, when you have lots of areas with boarded up and abandoned properties, when you have essentially broken windows type areas. Crime is not because of a vacant or abandoned property, it's because of the conditions that led to abandoned houses in the first place. I think that it would be beneficial for us not to essentially allow vacant properties to remain vacant and remain on the books of somebody who doesn't live here, but then to try to reclaim those properties and give them back to the people who live in the communities, not just keeping the wealth of the neighborhood and the wealth of the community out of the hands of the people in the community, but to essentially say you're not allowed to just have a vacant home here and just sit on it.
Well, I don't know that we can legislate what people do with their properties. That would be a legal department question. number one. Number two, there are other programs in other cities that are called land banking efforts. We have talked about that, but not in great detail. That would be maybe more toward a program that would be getting toward what you're looking for as a land bank program.
I wouldn't like to encourage essentially people to have a process to hold onto a vacant property and not live here. I would rather look into a land banking type of program for something like this.
But the city then has to be willing to buy properties and hold them. And at this point, I have not heard that council wants to buy properties and hold them and manage them.
So I
That's
see,
a broader discussion.
yeah, I agree. I just see a registration process as being more of just like a registration process that we know, because I agree, I don't know that it's going to take any burden off the city. I think it's going to be another program and we're going to be doing what we're doing anyway. And so having a registration process so that we know where the vacant homes are so that we can decide what to do about them later, I think would be beneficial.
And that's what this is.
I was
That's
gonna
exactly what this is.
I feel like my question was answered in terms of what this does. I would appreciate maybe a couple of the models that you referenced from other communities.
Sure.
But I see a value, I mean, I think this does at least a good chunk of what you were talking about in terms of, we don't want someone holding on to a property in our community as an investment, as a tax write-off, and not doing anything. This at least starts that process and identifies those properties and gives us some tools. I don't think it's not the end solution, but it needs to be maybe a piece of the larger fabric.
And I agree with that. This is not the end-all and be-all. This isn't going to solve all the problems, but number one, we need to know where the problems are and who the problem is. So if we have a vacant property registration, we can start building a database to inform us. Is there a person or an entity? Is there an area of town? Are there nodes and corridors that we can put some economic development in? We just don't have that information right now. This would get us at least some data, and hopefully get us out of monitoring properties as much as we do.
So Ann, when you respond to a complaint today, you board up the house, you don't necessarily take that next step and try to contact that out-of-town Chicago LLC that owns it. Is that?
We board it. It's an emergency. We send them an invoice. They have a right to appeal the invoice to the administrative hearing process. If it's not a public nuisance, then that ends our involvement.
Right.
I mean, so it can sit there for another 10 years without anybody touching
So
it.
this would take that to a next step?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the beginning step to have better control.
Right, and inform us of
Right,
what's out
what we
there.
have.
I mean, right now, we're sort of guessing what's out there, and I think we need a scatter map or a pinpoint map or,
database
something to
of it.
know where it is and start informing us of what the problem is. And then if you want to start talking about land banking, at least we have the data to have an informed conversation.
I guess my issue is with the, essentially the property being kept in the hands of an owner or management company that is not of the neighborhood. I can see how just upkeep is, and, generally having somebody going in and out of the property is desirable. I don't like the piece, there was a piece talking about city staff has the right to require additional security measures. What purpose would that serve?
Well, if something's getting broken into and fires are getting started, would we want it fenced off for better control? Would we want if there's a hole in a parking lot, for instance, which we've had happen, do we want to fence that parking lot off so that a car doesn't get damaged until we can get the repairs made?
I mean, could we not just send Public Works in to patch?
No.
Okay.
We have to give notice, due process.
Okay, then I guess having additional security measures, I would rather, just invest in the property versus letting them hold on to it for longer and requiring security measures that are just going to bring, it doesn't bring up the morale of the neighborhood to do something like that.
I totally understand what you're saying. It's a much larger and much more expensive solution. I'm not saying that we shouldn't explore it. There are other communities that have land banking efforts. But we have to figure out how that looks. I mean, are we going to set up a nonprofit to hold the title to the property? Is the city going to hold title to the property? What are the methods that we can get title to the property to hold it in a land bank? There's certain state codes that we have to follow. We can't just go start taking properties.
What I'm saying is that at this point, I am not opposed to like a registration process. I'm just opposed to the additional security measures. I'm opposed to like I don't know, essentially keeping it in the hands out of the neighborhood, because when we're talking about neighborhoods that have a lot of vacant properties, it's going to be like areas that also have low home ownership versus rental numbers. And I just want to see that the intention of this, like we listed the intention as encouraging greater investment, which is literally just serving to grow the wealth of developers over the actual community members. And so that's my concern, is that our intention is not in line with supporting the community, bringing wealth back into the community, uplifting the people who already live there.
Noted. Thank you.
Sue Ann, I brought some pictures, and I think everybody's well aware. I've got a building in my neighborhood. The windows have been broken out for multiple years. You can even tell some of the boarded up is old.
This would address that. We would tell them, you can't keep it boarded, you have to reglaze, put glass, put real doors in.
But I have emails going back to June. The graffiti is still there, and I realize it's a different department. The latest email was January 7th, where somebody says, well, it's winter and we really can't do graffiti removal in January. Well, this goes back to June, and it's still taken care of. I don't think I should have to drive in and out of my neighborhood and see the racial slurs and the profanity that's on this building. I have an email from Neighborhood Services dated September 9th that says, we've looked at the pictures and it's not a public nuisance. I'm not sure I understand how this could not be a public nuisance. It's been vacant for years and years and years. Why is this still here? And this is owned by somebody who lives about 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm. The building itself has not deteriorated to a point where it is unsafe or uninhabitable.
All the broken windows?
Broken windows do not make a public nuisance. It has to be the structure. Now, a vacant property registration, we could tell them, you can't have broken windows. You have to put real glass in.
That's
You have to
what I
get rid of the
wanna see.
graffiti. You have to upkeep the exterior of the building to
Okay.
keep it from deteriorating inside. Until it gets so far gone that we can't save it, that's when it's a public nuisance. That can take years. What we're trying to do is get it buttoned up now, get real glass in it, get real doors, get the graffiti, get somebody who's monitoring
I
it.
fully support that. What about graffiti? Because I guess I don't understand, and this is segueing a little ways off,
Mm-hmm.
but if this was reported in June, I took these yesterday, why hasn't that property owner, I'd like to see something telling me that the property owner was notified, because I realize you have to notify the property owner before you can go onto their property and remove graffiti.
I can certainly get that for
But-
you. It isn't my department,
I-
but I
I
can certainly get it
understand
to you, yes.
But racial slurs,
Should have been handled as an emergency, in my opinion.
in my opinion, it should have been
Yep.
too. And this has
I'll
been
look
on there
into
a
it.
long, long time.
Yeah, I'll look into it.
And I think you know what the address is.
I do know
You
what the
can-
address is.
And I brought, I mean, to be told, it's, sorry, there's nothing we can do, it's not a public nuisance. I just don't get it.
That's why I want this ordinance.
I know, that's what I've
Give us
been
the
pushing
tools,
for a
give us
long
the
time.
tools so that we can do something when you have this problem.
But let's put some teeth into it.
Absolutely.
Let's put some teeth into it. If you're going to only
Yep.
charge them $100 to register it, are we going to charge them, is that $87.50 every time you go out once a month?
Every time we go out on a complaint. So here's what the fees, we know that we are not charging for our rental inspection program what the fees could be. We're way undercharging. We have been told, and it's correct by legal, that we can't make money on these.
I get that.
So we're taking the best information we have in the fee schedule and trying to mirror it so that we're not accused of going over and above in our fees. When we do a fee study, if council requests it, then we can start looking at the totality of these programs and figure out what the fees are more reasonable for.
And are we keeping commercial properties separate from residential?
No, the
Because-
vacant property registration would be for all types of property.
Because I think that's key. I mean, our vacant commercial buildings are what brings down the neighborhoods.
Well-
And when
Oh, they all
somebody
do.
has
They all
to
do.
drive by this and see this every single day.
Yep,
That's not good.
I totally agree.
So if the fees are not too big money, fines can be set.
Fine, the civil infraction
What is the?
is set by state code.
That was 700.
750 for the first offense, 1,000 for each
Right,
after.
so I'm just saying, from that standpoint, that's where you get people's, they're going to, registration's not the price, it's the fees.
Yes.
For fines, the fines for,
Well,
And
fine.
getting a lien against your
Right.
property.
right.
But then we end up buying it, and then the fees, the fines go away.
We
lot
aren't
of
buying
times.
these properties at
Pardon
this
me?
point.
No, I know, but when they do come available and a nonprofit buys it,
If a nonprofit
then
buys.
those fees are, then those
Fines.
fines are taken away.
In some incidents, yeah, in some instance, yes. Yep. Right now, your
Is it-
policy is only for nonprofits. I'm sorry, Joe.
No, isn't the fine, it's not, it's only if they don't register it, correct? We're not fining them for not fixing the window, are we, Sue Ann?
We would fine them for not registering. If we find a window that is boarded and doesn't have glass in it, we would send them a notice. If they don't put the glass in, then it could go to a civil infraction with a fine. But there will be steps of notification in there.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the efforts. I mean, any tools that we can put in your toolbox to help improve our neighborhoods, and I believe this is a tool that you probably have needed for a long time, I would be supportive of it. I think most of us on the council would be supportive of it because, I mean, we're here to work for the neighborhoods, and we've all said that neighborhood improvements is our number one priority. So I would be supportive of it. And to see how it works. And then we can look at land banking. We've talked about land banking for 8 years that I've been on the council, and, nothing's ever happened. But we've got to get data to see how many vacant and abandoned properties, and I don't think we have a good idea at all right now what's out there in our city. And that's shameful, and we need to get a grip on it, figure out what's going on. And I think this will help.
I think that's the point of this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
do too.
Carl?
Call?
Yeah.
Sue Ann, could you share with what communities your proposed guidelines are based on?
I don't have the list right off the top of my head.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole bunch, and then there's a Center for Community Progress out of Boston and Chicago. And they
Okay.
talk a lot about vacant property registration. I've been getting emails from a gentleman who has his own program, which we're not interested in purchasing somebody else's services, but he talks about the
Okay.
vacant property registration requirements.
And so how long could a property be on the vacant property registrar, or, I'm sorry, registration or the list? Is there any sunset on,
No,
they could be
it-
there?
It'll remain on the list until it's reoccupied.
Okay.
I feel like I do need to speak up as the only black person at the table in over a decade. That's a soft A nigga. It's not a racial slur. A black person wrote that. Just want to make that clear. But on top of that, I did have a couple questions. It listed buildings that are subject to foreclosure. I had a question about the wording because there are certain times when a building is subject to foreclosure but hasn't been foreclosed yet and people are still living in the property, and I didn't want that to, yeah, I think.
No, it's not vacant at that point,
Okay, so it's only once it becomes vacant?
yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear in the language so that can't be abused.
A lot of times what happens, unfortunately, is people who get a notice of foreclosure get scared and they move, and then it goes vacant. And they they could actually stay there until the court orders them to move, but they don't. And then the mortgage company doesn't do anything. And so then it becomes a liability for the neighbors.
Okay. The other one is this going to be applied to rental units? Are we going to get a registration of vacant rental units?
Yeah, there would be. It would be part of that.
Okay, so like even if, I mean, like not the whole entire building is vacant, but like a unit in a
No,
building?
we don't get into units.
Why not?
The license goes with the building, not with the unit, so we don't track vacancies of units.
Okay, I think we should, so that we know how many vacant units we have. That might be a different process.
I can look
Yeah.
into it. I don't know how we would manage it, but let me look into it.
It might be a different registration
It would
thing
be.
than this.
Yep.
I think that's all I had for right now, I'm not sure. I thought that was a good question of, I think that this could be something beneficial once we have the registration to then put a limit on how long you're allowed to stay vacant, potentially.
All right, anybody have anything else? Let's go ahead and move on to the amendments to the rental code. Joanne, are you going to handle that as well?
I am, actually.
All right.
Mayor, council.
The Sue-Ann Show.
Just to circle back, with that direction that I received on the last presentation, I'm going to go ahead, draft the ordinance and bring it forward. Yes?
Good.
Yes.
Sooner the better.
Okay. So we have talked previously about some rental code amendments, and so I'm just going to recap where we're at right now. We did an amendment to the rental code that eliminated knockout panels. So the knockout panels are going to sunset out in 2025. We also talked about elimination of shared air from forced air heating units, and you asked for more information, so we're bringing it back.
You
We
want to define knockout panels?
Oh, sure. Yep, sorry. In some older units, older buildings where they've been converted years and years ago, it was determined that you could do a means of egress through another unit. So if you didn't have a second means of egress on a second or third floor unit, but your neighbor did, you could get out of your apartment, walk across the hall, break a panel in the door, reach in, and then go out through their unit. That was your second means of egress. A lot of times what we were finding on inspections is people were putting metal over the knockout panels. They were putting large pieces of furniture over the doors because they didn't want people getting in and out of their apartments. So for security reasons and for safety reasons, and working with the building department, we determined that knockout panels needed to be eliminated. It's not safe, it's not a guaranteed means of egress. If somebody doesn't want you in their apartment and puts a block out, it's just not safe for the occupants either. You got people wandering around a building that can essentially break into your unit. So council did approve the elimination of the knockout panels. At the same time, we talked about shared air from forced air heating units. And again, you asked for more information. And staff at that time had suggested that the nuclear family exemption be eliminated. Kind of taking a different course on that with this presentation. And we did discuss conducting a fee study.
Can you
So-
go more into conducting a fee study, because I didn't see that anywhere in this presentation?
The last time we did a presentation, we talked about a fee study. It's been,
So we're just not talking about it again today, really?
yeah, I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we had suggested that the exemption be eliminated because we're feeling that some of these nuclear family houses had some maintenance problems and some issues. But when you bring it forward in support of the AHU exemption effort, we feel like there's a place for the nuclear family exemption because we think that exterior maintenance can be addressed through property improvement code. So we kind of think that it should stay in place until maybe there's further study.
Can I get clarification? Is AHU
Sure.
the same thing as ADU, the accessory dwelling units
Yes.
or housing units?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So,
The nuclear family is the owner, their parents, their grandparents, their children and grandchildren can reside in a property, any one of those up, down, without a rental license.
I'm fully supportive of that. But I thought, from what I read in the presentation, are you saying that if I own a house and one of my kids lives in that house, right now, I don't have to have a rental certificate for that? Are you saying that we're not going to move forward with having single-family homes that are not on the same property?
I think that needs some further discussion.
Okay.
So
Can-
what we're saying
Can we
right
go
now.
back? Sorry. I mean, maybe this gets explained in future slides, but in the last slide, like, I didn't really understand the two bullet points that were at the bottom there. Is that going to get explained more in future slides? Because I didn't think I understood it when I went through the presentation earlier.
See if I can go back.
Does it let you? Yeah, so where the exemption has a place in the code, I don't understand where you're proposing that it stay. I don't understand how it supports the AHU expansion effort or the exterior maintenance.
Okay, so let me see if I can explain. It's in the rental license code, chapter 60, and you don't need a rental license if your parents or grandparents, children or grandchildren live in the structure. You're exempt from the rental license. So we also have the AHU, which is I as an owner have to live on the property, and I can have a separate unit that I let other people live in, right?
Or family members
Or
or something.
family member, yep, any relation. In either of those situations, right now, you wouldn't need a rental license.
Okay.
But if you had an AHU with your, I don't know, cousin or a non-related person living in it, that unit needs a rental certificate right now. But I think we need to study that and see what the effects are going to be.
Okay, I would actually, I do think the nuclear family exemption needs to stay, especially given the entire millennial generation's inability to buy homes based on the economy. But I also think that limiting it to, that single line relation is pretty white family structure focused, and that's not how a lot of people actually live. A lot of people do live with cousins, uncles, aunts, things like that in their immediate family, and it's just a different conception of what an immediate family is. So I would like to see that expanded, actually. But I also would like to understand the exterior maintenance piece.
We have on the, we are building right now a program for exterior property maintenance.
Yes.
And we believe that the nuclear family units can be addressed if there's outside maintenance problems through that program and not the rental license program,
Through the AHU program?
through the property improvement program.
You're saying there's no point in duplicating.
No point in duplicating inspection services.
So we're no longer suggesting that we get rid of the exemption at all?
Correct.
Okay.
We want to leave it on the books.
All right.
But we're still going to consider if it's off-site.
Well, I think, so here's where I get into the next slide.
Okay.
Make no change now, but study the exemption as it relates to units not connected to an AHU. So when we do our property study, our citywide study, we'll know if this is a nuclear family exempted and what the exterior maintenance of that property looks like. And maybe it'll inform us that we believe those need a rental license for the safety of the occupants. But I'm not willing to say that without doing some research.
And we don't have many AHUs right now in the city that are separate, because I know
No, we really don't.
ARP has gone out there and tried to find them, and they're simply not there.
There's not very many right now.
So I get that, but
Yep.
I think my concern always was that person who owns multiple houses, and he says, oh, well, my son lives here, and there's no maintenance on it. It's in horrible condition, but because it's considered a family unit, they don't have to maintain it. They don't have to have a rental code, and that's not good for our neighborhoods.
Right, but I think, honestly, what we need is to do that property survey and then make those connections and see what what's really happening. Is nuclear family worse than the neighbor's house or not. I mean, we don't have that data
Why wouldn't you have it now? Because,
because we haven't done a condition report of the whole neighborhood to know where those might be next to an owner occupied.
but even if I have a rental, even if my son lives in a house offsite, I still have to let the city know that it's a rental.
Yep.
And it's owned by, and it's being maintained or being occupied by a family member.
But we don't go out and inspect it.
No, I know you don't go out and inspect it, but you know where they are.
Yeah, we can map those. Yep.
Condition that you don't know?
Right. We haven't done a condition report.
I guess I've heard a couple times that we've done condition reports, like for InvestDSM, we did a condition report, but is that different?
This is updation. This is updating from what we did with
So it's another one?
Well, InvestDSM did theirs 5 years ago.
Yep.
So now they're coming forward saying, we want to do that same report type citywide. We'll get an idea of up, down, what's moving. And then they're going to pick their new districts. At the same time, we have our code enforcement piece, which is the property improvement. So we have agreed that our field workers will go out and do those assessments for 2 reasons. InvestDSM, rating, and sort of our property conditions so that we can start tracking where we believe exterior property maintenance will be necessary.
So we're doing one all at the same time for
Yep.
both? Okay, great.
Absolutely, yep.
And then, so when it says study the exemption as it relates to units not connected to an AHU, and I believe this is what Linda was talking about, we're talking about a family member living in a unit or a house that is not on the property of the, like, father,
Yep.
mother, whatever, okay.
Yep.
And that doesn't connect, that's not the accessory dwelling units, it's just like, I own a house across town and you live in
Yep,
it?
right.
Okay. So the exemption currently applies to that?
Pardon?
The exemption currently applies to that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Sue Ann, are we partnering with InvestDSM to do this assessment, or are we doing it and giving the information to InvestDSM?
I believe we are doing it and giving them the information.
Okay, and as I say, the city of Des Moines is doing that for a program that we are invested in and the county's invested in, correct?
Correct. Our staff and our IT and our iPads will be used to gather the information and share with InvestDSM.
Okay.
So if we're ready to move on, we can talk about separation of shared forced air furnace units. Just to be clear, this does not include boilers. Boilers are not included in this discussion.
Can you explain what a shared forced air furnace unit is?
Certainly. Most houses have a furnace.
Not a
and
boiler.
Pardon?
Not a boiler.
Not a
furnace.
boiler.
Okay.
Although there are some single families with boilers, but most of them have just a furnace. And it draws air from the whole house through the ductwork, runs it across the heat exchange to heat it, and blows it back out somewhere else. So all of that air is constantly being circulated and shared within the unit. It's not pulling air somewhere else, it's all circulating within the system.
And a boiler is different because it heats water and then pushes that through pipes.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, it puts it in radiators, and so
Yeah.
you're not circulating the air.
Yeah.
Neat.
The radiators heat, and that's where you get your water heat.
Okay.
So in the history of Des Moines and other cities, people would take older houses that are too large to be economically, or they needed housing, so they split them up. And so they would use the one furnace, and they would just split the ductwork off, right? So in that whole building, air is circulating between all the units. That's the shared air portion.
Are there any apartment buildings, as you would think of an apartment building that does this, or is it really just those houses that have been split into units?
There have been historically some apartment buildings that have done that. I know Wakanda down there by the golf course.
The brick ones over there?
Yep.
Okay.
And we made them separate them all out. And put
Already?
individual heating units in each of those apartments.
So that means a individual furnace for each apartment?
Right, the furnace then just circulates the air within its unit. It doesn't
Gotcha.
share with the neighbor's unit.
Gotcha.
It just, in that unit,
But mostly it's the houses.
mostly it's house.
Okay. Thank you.
So we've recommended eliminating the shared forced air furnace units. This would follow the International Mechanical Code, which the city has adopted. It would reduce the health risk through the recycled air. Safety, it would stop the spread of fire and smoke through the ventilation system, and it would increase the energy efficiency of older units.
But this is not on ADUs,
No, no, no.
correct? Okay. Just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I mean, if you were doing a house and you put a second unit in it, it
A
might,
house, but
right, not a separate
if
unit.
I've
No,
got
no,
an
no.
ADU in my,
You're going to have your own separate furnace, yeah. Right.
right.
Yeah.
So if there
That's
was,
through the building code, yep.
that's already there, like if you build an addition, you can't have it be on the same furnace? Okay.
Yeah, the building department wouldn't issue a permit for a shared air unit. So when we talk about health risks, the EPA states, the link between indoor air pollutants, radon pollution, carbon monoxide, remember the Legionnaire disease. Radon is shared through the shared air, carbon monoxide, numerous indoor air pollutants, dust mites, mold, pet dander, environmental, tobacco smoke, cockroaches, allergens, fleas, whatever is going to jump between units. So those that have asthmatic conditions are going to be more affected by shared air in these houses. So that's sort of the health risk that we're trying to eliminate. Fire safety, this is the big one. I hate to use tragedy when I talk about these things, but there was the fire in Bronx, and there are people who passed away, and God help me, I'm sad. But when you talk about fire safety, you have shared ducts that go through walls, and so you have smoke going through the ducts. You have, and smoke is a heated fuel source, so if it goes through a duct and dumps out, it can start a flash fire in the next unit. Toxic mixture contains poisonous gases. If you eliminate those shared air vents that go through the walls, you cut down on your fire issues. And when somebody has to separate these shared air units and put in single units, they also have to cut those duct off and stop the shared air. So it becomes a contained unit. Energy efficiency. We all know older furnaces are not as efficient as new ones. The statistics are up there. So if you upgrade the furnaces, then you're going to have more energy efficiency in the building because you're not using one giant old system that operates at 56 to 70%. You're now going to go up to 80, 90 or 80, 89%. So that's a significant energy issue. So when you talk about maintenance and repairs, so the life expectancy of a forced air unit is roughly 15 to 25 years. Forced air systems, a forced air system would fail our permitting process. So if they came in for a permit to replace that one unit, they wouldn't be allowed to repair it. So theoretically, over time, replacements would happen. But our concern is that older units are being patched indefinitely and perpetuating the fire safety, air quality, energy efficiency concerns. So we think we just need to, stop that and get in there and make them separate them.
So at this point, if you do an inspection, they are required to, or like if they do an update, they're required to replace it, but they're not doing the full update, and that's what you're trying to.
When we go in and do a rental inspection,
Yes.
if the heating unit works and is supplying heat at this point, that is currently passing our inspection.
Okay, but then it's like building codes or permits, or there's another process where it would eventually get replaced, is what you're saying?
So if the unit fails, and we go in and
Okay.
say, okay, your unit failed, you need to pull a permit to replace it. They go down to the Permit and Development Center and they say, you have to have 4 units if it's a fourplex. You have to separate it out. We're not going to permit a new furnace for a single furnace in a multi-unit. What we find is that people are just doing whatever they can to keep that unit going indefinitely. And we have to, at some point, just pull the Band-Aid off and say, you know, we got to quit doing this.
So instead at rental inspections, you're going to go in and say, what kind of furnace do you have? You got to change it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So if you talk about the International Maintenance Code, we adopted the Uniform Mechanical Code in 1972. It would, at that point, did not allow return air from being discharged into another dwelling unit. We are now under the 2021 International Mechanical Code, and it's not allowed under that. Again, remember that the air is taken from all units, passed in through the furnace, and then redirected back into all the units. It's all commingled, shared, and dumped back into the units. So this kind of came to a head when we had a rental. I think she had a fourplex, and she went ahead and replaced an old unit with a new forced air unit, didn't pull permits, and we caught it on the rental inspection, and we said, no, you didn't pull a permit, and you're going to have to separate out and put in 4 units. She appealed it to the Building and Fire Appeals Board, who said, no, you have to separate. It's not safe, and you need to separate it. We've now had the building official determine that HVAC systems that mix air between dwelling units expose occupants to health and life safety risks not allowed or accepted by the city mechanical codes. So the suggestion is that in Chapter 60, which is the rental inspection code, that we amend the code to say that shared forced air furnaces need to be eliminated by the second license renewal after January 1st, 2022, and no later than December 31st of 2025. That's our
Would it be
suggestion.
possible to put something in there that would eliminate, instead of saying it has to be done by this date, if it's not, if it was just brand new in 2020?
They wouldn't have been able to get a permit in 2020, so it would have been an illegal
How
installation.
about 2018, 2019?
Never. Without a permit, they couldn't have done it.
So they've been able to, it's long enough time that any furnace probably should be replaced. Is that what you're getting at?
Since 1971.
Yeah, so,
But before this, people were they were able to replace their furnaces.
Before 1971, they could put in a single.
So you're saying that any home that this would affect would have to have a furnace that was installed prior to 1971?
What I'm saying is that any structure that has a shared forced air system
Yes.
needs to upgrade it and put in the 4 or the single
The 4.
shared air.
But what if somebody just did it in like 2015? Are you saying it wasn't allowed even then?
No, it was not.
They didn't pull a permit.
If they did it without a permit because nobody would have issued that permit.
Okay, okay.
so do we have any idea? We probably have no idea how many,
No.
okay, would be impacted, who
I
have not
really
done it
don't.
correctly, because most people have replaced, but you said they've been piecing it together, so they
Yes.
could have extended the life of the
Yep.
furnace forever.
Duct tape and baling wire.
Okay.
Sorry, that was funny.
Sorry.
I was going to say, this is obviously a serious safety risk, so we need to move forward with it. I'm wondering the impact, if this could have an impact of moving, like decreasing density, essentially. Like if you have a home that's split into 4 units, is someone going to get this in the rental inspection and just be like, forget it, I'm just going to sell the house for someone to, scale it back to a single family so that I don't have to do that?
That's possible.
And I mean, do we have any thoughts about mitigation of that? Because I mean, like, obviously we need to do this, but I don't want to like lose units. because someone doesn't want to.
And I don't want to lose units either.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like what we
But
can do
I don't
while
want
doing
people
this.
living in unsafe units.
I don't want to trade it at all. I don't want to trade it at all. I'm just trying to think of, because we need to do this, how can we ensure, or is there a method that we can make sure we're not losing units while people are doing this? Because this needs to happen.
We can look at it. That's all I can.
It's just something to think about, I guess.
You'd have to have on the back end an incentive program to assist those landlords who aren't capable of doing those upgrade costs.
Well, or you'd have to somehow put money into another unit, creating a unit somewhere else. Offset would be my thought.
Because
I don't want
some
to
owners,
incentivize, I want to do offset.
yeah, some owners, it's not that they don't have the money, they choose not to do it. So it's
Right.
a matter of how do you mitigate and what's the strategy behind
Because
it.
I know that's happening in Drake right now. Like a lot of like big houses got split into rental units, and now they're being like, you know, put back into like a big single family home. And I feel like this is going to accelerate that, even though it's extremely necessary we do this. I'm not going to suggest at all that we don't. I'm just thinking about, okay, so what are the consequences of this action and how can we mitigate that? So it might be an incentive program, I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think we should look at it and see what we can come up with. I understand what you're saying. I just don't know how we get that.
Yeah, no, I'm open for suggestions.
I think it's the continual development of more units. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you look in the Drake area, there's a lot of new units coming on. I appreciate that the old houses, but there was an old house that we had that wasn't safe.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
invest, I mean, yeah, it's going to be single family, but what was there before was unsafe.
It's a bigger
So-
picture issue you're thinking.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they go together, but we need to tackle the safety issue.
Yeah. My concern is that the old units in old houses that are, you know, questionable potentially are cheaper than the new units that are being built.
Yep.
That's my biggest concern, is that like people are being pushed out of the neighborhood right now. So how do we keep that from happening?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, we'll talk
So
about it.
with that direction, I'll bring forward a text amendment to you very soon.
But to your point, Dira, we can track, you know, I think it would be valuable to, you know,
We can
understand,
track the number of
understand the
units.
data so that you don't have unintended consequences of really any program that
Yep.
we initiate. And then if you do find out you're having those consequences, that, you know, so many fourplexes have been taken out of the affordable housing market, understand what that
Mm-hmm.
quantity, what is that order of magnitude, and then work with economic development and Chris's group to come up with programs and work
Yep.
with our nonprofit partners to try to replace those units.
I just don't want to wait for the data, because like I know, like I think we can kind of assume that this is going to happen, just with like, it's going to be inconvenient or, you know, like not economically desirable for the owner of a fourplex apartment unit to do this, when they could just leave the, or like get a new, like it's going to be more expensive essentially to have four heating units versus like just replacing the one and then selling the house off and having it be single family again. And so I don't want to wait for data to see that we have created a problem. I want to, you know, address it before it happens, if there's a way to do that. Does that make sense?
We can certainly.
We can do
yeah.
both.
Well, it's not limited to just this program, right? I mean,
Yeah.
We see it happening, as there's been investment in the Drake neighborhood. I mean, it's a larger issue, and I do think we need programs to encourage more affordable and workforce housing in neighborhoods, and particularly in neighborhoods
Yep.
where we are losing that. Because, you know, we're getting some, and we'll get units, for example, as part of the merge project. There will be affordable units, but they won't be at the same level, and they'll likely be efficiency, whereas in a home, you might have a two-bedroom that a family could live in. And so we do need to be mindful of it, but I think.
I guess I just don't want to sacrifice these units in the hope that we're going to have other ones, when we know for a fact that like the development of the Drake neighborhood has caused some of this already. Like, I don't think that we should just let it keep happening. I think I would rather mitigate ahead of time so that we don't push people out of the remaining units that are in the neighborhood. Like, I agree it's a problem, we need to do something about it, but I just don't want to create a situation where you find out that your landlord put the house up for sale because he doesn't want, you know, to create a safe living situation for you.
Sue Ann, question. Do we have any idea, let's say there was one of these houses that had been single-family, got converted into multiple units. I mean, I've seen where a single family is turned into 7 units. So you've got in that house an HVAC that is whole house, and we're now trying to mitigate the spread of disease and germs and smoke and everything else. So it's a public health issue. Do we know what the cost is to turn 1 unit into 7, separate them, and then have 7 different units? Because that's going to affect the ability for somebody
It
to
is, yep.
continue to rent the property at a price that some people would define as affordable, but if it's going to cost them $5,000 to $10,000 a unit to do that, that might also be an issue where they say, I'm not doing it.
And
Which
some of
would
them have chosen to.
adversely affect.
Yep, and some of them have chosen to reduce the number of units, so they have a larger living space with one HVAC.
That's my concern.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
I totally get it. My concern from the seat I'm sitting in is, I don't want tenants at risk.
I don't think that we have to trade one for the other.
Why? My rental code is going to take care of the enforcement, and I'll certainly work with any other department to work on the affordable housing issue. Absolutely. I think we have to move forward with this amendment.
Yes.
And then we have to work on the other issue in tandem.
Is there a possibility to put something in this code that like prohibits a landlord from opting out by selling the home instead of just updating it?
No, we can't prohibit sales and transfers of property.
So it would just have to be an incentive program from us to like pay for it essentially, to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slippery slope
That's a
there.
slippery slope.
Yeah.
How so?
I think we need to continue with and we are constantly trying to provide affordable housing units in our neighborhoods, and we've talked about the different programs and the tools that we have available, and they're very, very restricted. So safety is number one in this scenario, and it doesn't do anything to. We're going to continue trying to create those affordable housing opportunities in the neighborhood.
But there's no safety if there's no units. I mean, like, it's safety is absolutely number one, but if somebody gets pushed out of their living situation, who have we made more safe? I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this. I'm saying we absolutely should do this with the intention that we don't cause anybody to be pushed out of their home because a landlord doesn't want to update it and make it safe for people because they don't. Like that, I just think we need to be doing both at the same time. Like, how can we implement this program to make sure people are safe and also implement this program to make sure people are housed?
Right, and I think I will say we are doing both. I think really what the whole council's asking for is to do more. We are doing a significant amount to produce affordable housing in the city of Des Moines.
We're not saving this housing. That's what I'm talking about, is this specific housing where we're making landlords update their property to make them safe. It's a financial incentive for landlords not to have that property anymore. Then if they have to invest in it, they don't want to do that. They'd rather just sell it off and not have to make that improvement. And so, Sue-Ann, this is not your problem to solve necessarily because you need to make the.
But I'm part of it.
Yes, but you need to make the rental code
I'm
safe.
not walking away from that discussion, but
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying. I totally get it. And bringing this forward, I knew that was part of the discussion.
Yeah.
That's not lost on me. But in my heart, I can't not bring it forward knowing that somebody could be injured or die in a fire. Because
And I can't, and in my heart, I can't ignore the fact that people are going to get pushed out of their homes at the same time. And that's not our fault. We need to make it safe, but we also need to make sure that landlords are not just going to throw people out because they don't want to make it safe for them.
And that's where we have the discussion over.
And I don't think the solution is we're building affordable units elsewhere.
In some cases, too, if a house that we took over because a person wanted to sell, we found housing for those people. We found other housing, because what they were in was not safe, and it would not have been acceptable under code or whatever. So there are many cases where people are finding other housing and in new units coming up or whatever, or other units.
And we've done it on a much larger scale, such as the Randolph downtown.
Right.
Where you had dozens and dozens of people.
But we're not acquiring these homes and then finding places for other people. It's just the landlord's decision to sell the house, and then people are put out, and then they have to find other housing. Like, it's not like we're acquiring the homes.
Correct.
But we didn't, like the one case, we didn't just put people out. They found them other places to live.
So then can we put a requirement in that if the landlord sells it, then he needs to relocate his tenants?
I don't think you can do that legally.
So then we are still in the same issue.
We are.
Like this, I don't think that this is solved by just saying, oh, we're building affordable units elsewhere, especially when we know the affordable units. I'm thinking of the Drake neighborhood because I know it's happening there. Like the affordable units in the Drake neighborhood, the units in the Drake neighborhood are not affordable at the same rates that the units in the converted housing was. So where do people go? Like, I'm going to need solutions for that before we're just like, yeah, we're going to go ahead with this and damn the consequences. Like, we need to go ahead with this, I just want solutions at the same time.
Well, even if we put this in, an owner could just say, we're getting out of it.
And they do a lot.
Well, they could, that's their right to sell.
But this is going to accelerate it, that's my point, that's why I'm bringing it up.
Not necessarily, in some cases it might, but again.
Very expensive.
Okay, if you saw the house that I saw that was not, people should not have been in there. I mean, it wasn't fit, they were charging, I don't think was affordable. I mean, we don't even know what they charge. Just because it's a house doesn't mean they aren't overcharging for what people are getting. So I think that we have to be cognizant of that and still work on more affordability and try to develop more. And that's what I think everybody's been trying to do.
And we also know that there are very nice homes that are split into rental units that people love living in and don't want to get pushed out of. Because, and there are issues with heating in those houses too. And they need to have separate furnaces. We need to have safety and things like that. But the landlord is more likely to say, I don't want to buy 5 furnaces, so I'm just going to keep my one and turn it into a house and then sell it to somebody rich. And then it's just going to be a neighborhood full of rich people when it was not historically that. We just need to be cognizant of that, and we need to have a solution when we are implementing things like this, because it's a multifaceted issue. We can't just say, it's just one issue and we need to take care of that and we're going to forget everything else. This is important to the people who live in these places.
Joanne, do we have any data of how many units we're talking about? I mean, do we have anything that could tell us what we're even discussing and how many units we're even that we're worried about losing or possibly losing?
We do not have that data.
Okay. Is part of this process getting that data?
No, the part of that wasn't anticipated in this code amendment. The code amendment was just to address the separation and the safety issues. I think the discussion now is how do we do more for protection of tenants? That is sort of, it's together, but it's separate. I mean, I can deal with the rental code issues and the safety issue. The larger social issue is sort of outside of, NID's purview, but I'm willing to have those conversations and see if there's some data that we can gather as we go through this.
Well, we could collect data, for example, I mean, if we take this exemption out.
Josh, turn your mic on.
Yeah. If we take this exemption out, we could collect data on when we go back in a rental inspection and when we identify a house that has a shared unit that we then are making them replace that.
Correct.
We
We
can-
can have broader discussions with that landlord as they go through that.
Well, but the useful piece of information, we should be identifying the number of units in places like that, right?
Correct.
So every place that has units that are affected by this, so if there's a house with 5 units, we collect that data, house with 5 units, we would know if they renew their rental code and come up to code or not, or if they sell the property. So we could track whether or not they're renewing their rental code.
Additionally, we could track if they come in for a permit and say, I want to reduce the units to 4 and put in 4 furnaces instead of whatever was in there before. We can track those units.
So we should track those pieces, and I think what Indira is asking about is a commitment to build additional affordable units that may disappear as a piece of that process.
Or identify.
That's a separate program than the rental code, but it's a valid issue.
Sure.
Like, we should be figuring out how we build affordable units if we're losing those units.
I would say it's 100% fair representation. I think it's mostly fair representation. I'm concerned with not necessarily building additional units, but maintaining the units that we have, and that might not be in the specific structure because it might be a really negative, living situation, but it's not always a negative living situation. And so if we're talking about building additional units, I mean, I would be specifically thinking of building additional units in the neighborhood, like in the same area where we're losing those units. But really, I'm talking about maintaining, like, people live in rental situations for years and years at a time, sometimes. And, having, like, essentially creating a program where it's going to incentivize a landlord to say, I don't want to rent this property in this way anymore. I want to reduce units. I want to, like, eliminate this as a rental unit. That is pushing people out of a place that they have lived for any amount of time or plan to live for any amount of time. And so creating additional affordable units might be the solution in some cases when there are other code violations, creating a negative living situation, but it isn't necessarily the goal. Like, I am saying that I don't want to encourage density in these places to go down. I don't want to encourage a house that is split into multiple units to be put back into single family and then build an affordable unit somewhere else.
And I think to some of your concerns, the broader discussion of the missing middle as affordable units within neighborhoods, rather than pushing them out of the neighborhood. I mean, maybe that's something that we can discuss internally, is how do we get, fourplexes in the neighborhood where we've reduced the number of units in these older houses that are dedicated as affordable housing. I mean, that might be the direction that we need to go as a discussion. So we know that there's 5 buildings in Drake that are going to reduce by 5 units. Can we build a missing middle that's dedicated as affordable housing in that same neighborhood and allow tenants to stay in the same neighborhood? And proactively look at how we do that.
That would be a much closer to the conversation that I would like to have, yeah.
I think that's been the big discussion, is the whole missing middle and how do we put that back into all the neighborhoods
Yeah.
As affordable units.
as
not
affordable land, but.
Yep. Anyway, I would just throw that out there.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yep.
So going forward, Sue Ann, I mean, we do need to think about the safety aspect, and I think that's why you brought this forward, of current tenants that are there that are living with some of these hazards that we've allowed to have put in and leave in. And so you're asking to make those changes for the safety of the people that are living there, correct?
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know how we say no to that. I think that we need to definitely monitor, as Josh said, going forward, as some of these changes are made. What are we losing, or are we gaining some in these neighborhoods? And kind of let's keep track through multiple departments of in the neighborhoods. If we're losing some, did we gain something built in the Drake neighborhood or on the south side or something like that? I think that's all fair to say, but moving forward, I mean, this is a safety issue that we need to address now.
Yeah, Joe, I'm absolutely not saying no to this. I'm saying 100% yes to this, and also I would like to look at the solutions to the, not consequences in a negative sense, but just the cause and effect type consequences that are going to come from it, just at the same time, but I'm absolutely not saying no to this.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And that it's a little bit more work the staff's going to have to do is going forward as we're making these changes. And there's going to have to be, we're going to have to document some of the changes that are being made. If somebody comes in and says, well, I'm not doing that and I'm turning it back into a house, we're going to need to know that, and that's going to need to be documented. And I think that's important that we do know that. And how many units are we losing in that particular neighborhood? That's all. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, I think if we're doing, go on.
No, just moving forward with this particular presentation, I think that, I think we're all on the same page. We just we're asking staff to get some more data.
And we can certainly do that. I'm 100% behind that.
I think as we're collecting data, going even further than what Josh was talking about, it'd be nice to, like know what was the result of, this requirement being put into place? Was that result in less housing, et cetera? It would also be nice to know what happened to the people who were living there, if they got rehoused somewhere else, if their rent went up, if their rent went down, or what else happened to them. I don't know if we can track that, but it would be nice to do that.
A little harder than
That's-
voluntary.
They'd have to,
Voluntary still would get us data.
I mean, we don't have a tenant registry to even know who the people are. It's the
We can ask. When we go out on rental inspections, we can ask for,
No, I don't.
or we can ask tenants, or we can maybe have some kind of like communication where we say like, hey, we put this requirement in place for your landlord, and, if you want to keep in touch with us about what happens after the fact, let us know. Like,
we might need to partner with a nonprofit to get that information.
Yeah, us having a database of that sort of thing here, it's public record. It's a
It's
little,
not necessarily good
intrusive,
for-
but we can,
maybe it could be anonymous in some way. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Of just like,
understood.
just so we have anonymous data of like, did you get, how displaced were you by this happening? Not that I want to use that as encouragement not to have safety regulations, but just so that we know what's happening to people. I don't know how to go about that.
We'll
but-
think about it. It's problematic when we gather information.
Yeah.
Then it's open to public record, and tenants don't necessarily want their personal life to be part of an open record.
And I don't want that either. I'm just trying to think of how we can tell, like, not just if we lost units, but like, what happened to the people? Did their rent go up? Were they displaced? Did they move out of Des Moines? Are they houseless now? Like, what's happening, you know?
I think we'll talk about how to involve a nonprofit maybe to gather that information.
Okay, sounds good.
So my direction is to come back again with an ordinance, and we can discuss the other things.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, anything else?
No, Mayor, thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you. And Sue Ann, thank you for your presentation. We'll look forward to seeing that ordinance. Unless anybody has anything else at this moment, we'll see you back here this evening for our pre-meeting swearing-ins, and which will happen about 4:30, I think. So with that, this meeting's adjourned.
I have a question. Are we still going to do the photos today at 4? So I was not sure. I sent an email to Al and Scott. I mean, we're not going to be able to do the group photo today. And the photo, to me, I mean, given where Omicron is, that's probably the riskiest activity associated with the meeting tonight. And there's no reason why we couldn't delay it, particularly since we're going to have to delay the group photo.
Doesn't bother me. We can use old photos. The thing is that you.
I can send y'all a photo. I have good ones. You can put a little cute photo of me on there. I don't care.
What we're trying to do is get some consistency in our photos because we have different framing of shots, we have different backgrounds, and what we're trying to do is get those consistency. Some photos haven't been
We
taken
did
in
right.
4 years, and so.
I mean, we can always do it in 2 months, though.
If you would like to just opt out of the council, then we can do that as well.
So Al, could we just delay the group photo and continue with our headshots?
On that, because
Yeah, because Councilman Gatto's not here. So, but we
your
can,
call, council, so.
I mean, is your concern removing of masks to take photos and things like that?
Right.
I don't see why we can't delay it for a couple months. Like, I can send y'all a photo in the meantime, but everybody else has pictures.
Just like a month. Like,
We're just in the height of the surge right now.
yeah.
2 years into this, so I don't know if one is making a whole lot of difference.
2 months ago, it wasn't this bad.
All right, we'll delay it.
Okay, so have we decided we're delaying all of them?
Yes.
Okay?
We can still use our same headshot that we've used for, I mean, probably since some of us have been elected. I mean, why don't we just delay the group photo? I mean, I'm not going to be there tonight anyway, and do it in a couple months or whenever we think it's safe to be able to do something like that.
I mean, we just have like a really, really infectious variant right now, and it's just dangerous to be putting ourselves in that situation when we don't need to, and we can wait until, like, this surge, like, went over in just a couple months in South Africa. So, I mean, we don't know what the future is going to be, but hopefully we're not going to be dealing with Omicron for much longer, and we'll see what the next variant does.
Let's hope there's not another one.
Just put out something and we'll delay everything until,
Okay, we're going to delay everything? All right.
Can I,
So you don't have to wear a tie.
Yeah.
4:15 for the
Swearing in.
reception, 4:45 for swearing in, 5 o'clock for the meeting, right?
but we're still going ahead with the reception, correct?
Correct. That's,
We don't have to have cookies or anything, though.
Right. And everybody can keep their masks on.
Yep. Can I ask you, do we have, we had masks at our table, but are there going to be masks laid out for the audience? That's been something I talked to Scott about.
We always offer masks.
Right.
for
And
those that
N95s.
have them. They have to have them to come into City Hall.
N95s, because,
Until, we'll see what happens
I
with
don't
the
believe we have enough N95s for the general public, no. We don't have enough in inventory.
N95s are really hard
I
to get.
don't
Yeah.
think so. I'm not aware that we have enough in.
that was a request and a confirmation that I got from Scott, that we would have N95s for people coming into City Hall, so that they would switch into N95s and that everyone would be wearing them in the chambers.
I will have to look into that. I'm not aware of that conversation.
Okay, and it'd be great to get them to staff, too.
I just know that the availability of N95s is really tight. So if they've got enough, they've got them.
Yeah, I don't know if we have them or not. I'll have to check.
Because yours doesn't even qualify. You're a
I know, I'm a
KN.
KN. I'm a KN, because that's what you can find.
Yeah.
K is good.
KN would be good for the public.
It's better than cloth, yes.
Right, better than cloth.
We had talked about having people come down to security and being asked to switch into an N95 or a KN95 that would be provided, and I was told that that would happen. So if that wasn't purchased,
If they can get them,
I was told they were purchased for tonight.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
That'd be awesome.
I haven't been a part of that conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
This is news to me.
I know, you're filling in.
All right, with that, meeting's adjourned.
Hey,
Thank you.
save me one.
Yep, we're saving you one. We got it. We're going to lock it.
Great.
well, you should just take it off. It's not going to be there. Mine, I